Today we're working on the brakes. What you'll see with Panzer tractors, typically, sometimes they're different because they basically pulled rear axles out of junk cars that they could find. This one happens to just have a regular nut on the axle. Some of them will have a castle nut with a cotter pin. In either case, there shouldn't be a ton of preload on this drum. The drum, there is a tapered axle shaft. The drum has a corresponding taper bore. There's also a keyway on the axle shaft and the drum. That's what keeps it locked in with the axle. So these nuts pull a cotter pin if there's a cotter pin. These nuts typically are not that, like I said, tight. There shouldn't be that much preload on them. So in this case, I had already loosened up the nut. I've actually taken this drum off. I had issues with this. Typically, I made a quick tool for myself from prior projects. Bolt this into place, then use a slide hammer to break the drum free. That worked perfectly on the other side of this tractor, but on this side of the tractor, I actually had to go and rent a front-wheel drive hub puller. I'll show you that right now, actually. Got the hub remover tool, went over to Advanced Auto and just rented it through their specialty tool rental program, I guess you want to call it. It's $100 to borrow it, but I'm going to bring it right back, get all the money back. I don't need this thing. Plus, I would never buy a tool from there. In a nutshell, in order to get the brake drum off, I had to use the front wheel drive hub remover portion of this tool. It goes on, it bolted on like this. Basically put the 3 lug nuts in it, then took the center pivot, screwed that in so that way it goes down, and then it embedded itself in the axle end. And really I didn't have to put a lot of pressure on it. Obviously I had to put more pressure on the drum than the slide hammer was able to produce, but it popped right off. Everything looked real good. So start off with a slide hammer. That doesn't work. You have to get one of these. You cannot, like I said before, you cannot use a 3-jaw puller that goes on the outside of the drum. You're going to break the drum. They're real brittle on the outside. So Advanced Auto, AutoZone, whoever has one of these things, if you're having a difficult time with a slide hammer, this is what you need to get. Now that I showed you the hub puller that was required in order to get this drum off, once it pops off like, it'll make a bang like a flywheel and it'll pop off. Try not to have it hit the floor. These drums are quite brittle. You cannot use a 3-jaw puller. You will crack or break the drum. They're actually quite interesting. This is the center hub piece is riveted to a center section on this tractor, with the outer ring or the actual friction surface being pinned in. I'll show it to you in another portion of this video. But pop, the drum comes off. You slide it off, obviously. Once it pops, it's quite easy to get off. I'll show you. I'll spin this around. There's the keyway. This axle shaft actually had a cotter pin in at it one time, but it's really not necessary with the tractor. It doesn't spin that fast. As you can see, it's pretty simple. This lever here, which is coated in stuff, that's where all your force comes into play. So when you push down on the brake pedal, push this lever, the tractor actually still has the wheel cylinder in place. They kind of modified it a little bit, which is fine. Sometimes you'll see a lever. There'll actually be a lever that just kind of pushes the brake pad down into the drum. You can see, it's just filled with gook, grass, dirt, gear lube, bearing grease, whatever. So what we're going to do here now is I am going to fully disassemble all of the bits and pieces out here. I'll take the wheel cylinder out, the brake pad. This doesn't come out, it's actually welded into place, so I'm not really going to mess with that. I'm just going to clean it up really good, lubricate it. I'm actually going to take the backing plate off of the rear end itself, make sure then that way I can get it all good and clean and lubricate everything up. One thing you'll notice, there's no axle seal. Panzer didn't put the axle seals in. I'm gonna see if I can look around and see if I can find an axle seal that'll work, because I am going to change the diff fluid in it. It spins real nice. I mean, this thing has absolutely no grit, there's no slop even in the rear gears. So it's in real nice shape. So what I'm going to do is clean it all up. I'll locate an axle seal, and in the next part of this video, because I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible, so that way I don't bore you to death, but in the next video I'll show you this all cleaned up. Another part of the rear end that I forgot to mention is I got the backing plate off, obviously. There are a series of shims that are on this side. I don't know about the other side, I'll find out, but remember to note to self, make sure you put all the shims back where they need to be. In other words, if there's 5 of these, I think there's what, 1, there's 2, 4, 6, there's 8 different shims on this side. Just make sure the same 8 go back on. And here's the backing plate. Look at the brake shoe. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. That thing is pretty, it's pretty saturated with grease. Okay, I'm going to clean these all up and I'll show you a little bit more in a second. In this segment of the brake rehab, we're going to go over the brake cylinder. Panzer basically modified the original brake cylinder in order to be used on the tractor. Essentially what they did was they obviously closed the bleeder, and then they took the brake line, they snapped it off and then just bent it over. Ultimately there's no hydraulic fluid in this. As the, if I can hold it right, there you go, as the lever pushes down on the top of the brake cylinder, sorry about that, it pushes down on the pad, and then the big return spring will push it back up. The interesting thing is all that dirt that's right there, that came out of the top of this brake cylinder. It was completely tight and just wouldn't move. Now the interesting thing about this, and let me just we can get rid of the dirt now. Basically the interesting thing is this. The brake cylinder is made up of a few parts, and there is an adjuster screw, there is an adjuster spring which creates tension, and then there's the piston. And all the while the piston there's nothing, I mean, if you can see that, make sure I got it in the cut, it just slides inside the cylinder. There's no hydraulic fluid or anything. What you do is you just pull a little bit of bearing grease all over this thing, and that's what actually lubes the whole system. And this gets screwed on until it bottoms out. So now that's your tension to keep the adjuster in place. And basically this thing bolts into the backing plate in this position. This goes down in there, and that's it. That's all there is to it. So I cleaned this all up. The inside of it's all nice and sanitary. I did have to scrape out a little bit of rust. Made sure that there was nothing there. The aluminum cylinder or the plunger, totally cleaned that, cleaned the threads. So this wheel cylinder is all set to go back in the backing plate. So this side is completely cleaned and pretty much ready to go. Axle shaft, everything, the housing, the bearing, everything's all good and clean. The backing plate is in real nice shape, front and back. The drum on this side has been completely cleaned, all the nasty gear lube. Oh, and like I had said in my other video, the center section with the hub is riveted to a center, the hub section is is riveted to a center section, and then there's these little clips. Basically, the center section has these little clips that come in to the drum piece, and then they're all pressed fit all the way around. That's why you can't put a 3-jaw puller on this drum, because it's just it'll just break. It's real brittle. It's, you know, obviously diameter wise it's strong when the brake pads open up, but they're just, if you hook the edge, it'll just cut, this brake drum will pretty much come right apart. The brake shoe was interesting. The pad material is completely soaked to the bone with gear lube and grease. I took my torch and tried to cook most of the stuff out of it, but it looks like I'm going to have to reline both pads, or both shoes I should say, for this project. I found some shoe material online. It's not that expensive, so I think I'm going to get it. Here's all the shims, the hardware, the spring. We just took a look at the wheel cylinder. That's all set. I did find an axle seal for it, and it's a Chicago rawhide seal, so as soon as I get it, and if it's the correct seal, I'll give the part number out for you guys. But in a nutshell, that's where we are. So this brake is clean. The next video segment, I guess, will be it all back together. Hope you like this little menagerie of videos. Thanks. Bye.